Hello everyone, George DeSantis here with the look at the market for the week ending August 5th, 2016. And as usual, before we begin looking at the charts, I'd just like to read the disclaimer. So here's a disclaimer. Trading and investing has large potential rewards and large potential risks. This video presentation is designed for educational purposes only and is not a solicitation or advice to buy or sell any securities or other tradable instruments. You must be aware of the risks and be willing to accept them in order to invest in the markets, of course. Consult a licensed professional investment advisor for investment advice. I am not an investment advisor. Let's take a look at the charts. Here's the monthly chart of the S&P 500 that we usually look at. Of course, as I often say, this is a long-term chart, so nothing changes very quickly, week by week or month or day by day. So what we have here is we've just entered the month of August, and so we've only had a few days of trading, but we've closed at the top of the bar here, which means we close pretty much at the high for the month of August. We can notice also that in July we closed pretty much at the high of this bar, the month of July. We have the Kalman filter trending up nicely above the instantaneous trend line, and if we were to expand this chart and look back to as far back as 2009, you will see that when this Kalman filter is above the instantaneous trend line, as it was here, and going all the way back to 2009, we have an uptrend on the monthly chart, and that is something we want to be on the side of the trend. We want to trade with the trend, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So let's take a look at the weekly chart. All right, this is the weekly chart of the S&P 500. We can see here that the Kalman filter crossed way back in February, actually at the end of February, crossed above the instantaneous trend line, confirming this uptrend that started back on February 12th. And since then, the Kalman filter has remained above the instantaneous trend line. So we define that as an uptrend when the Kalman filter is above the instantaneous trend line. Well, now we still have that uptrend in place, and the only caveat here is that the trend is looking a little bit exhausted up here. We made a new high. However, if we were simply looking at candlesticks, we would see that we had a doji here, something that looks like a doji here with a small body, almost like a dragonfly, as some people call it. And then we have a hanging man. Looks like a hammer, but at the top of the trend, it's really a hanging man. And that's, as I pointed out last week, that's somewhat of a bearish signal. Now, we don't trade off of candlesticks alone, but they're very powerful and worthwhile paying attention to. So, for example, back here, you can see that this hanging man led to this downtrend, or at least it was at the beginning of this downtrend. We'll keep an eye on that. However, because the distance between the Kalman filter and the instantaneous trend line is so great, we have a ways to go before we test the instantaneous trend line. And I think that is at 2080, the instantaneous trend line, right here, 2080.92. Now the parabolic is still way below the most recent bar, that is this past week's bar. So no indication to reverse this trend from an uptrend to a downtrend. In the middle of the chart here, RSI 12, which is one of our best trend indicators, continues to remain above the 60% line. And so that's confirming the uptrend, which it crossed above the 40% line way back here in February. And since then, it remained above the 40% line, and that signals an uptrend. Now, MACD continues to trend up from above the zero line, and at the bottom of the chart, percent R is just at about 100 right now, indicating that momentum is still pretty strong here. So we have an uptrend on the monthly chart, we have an uptrend on the weekly chart. Let's take a look at the daily chart. Here's one of the daily charts of the S&P that we look at. It's the 930 chart. In other words, instead of the instantaneous trend line and Kalman filter, we have a 9 EMA, which is the yellow line, and the 30 weighted moving average, which is the blue line. We can see that right here we went into this trading range, or what we call a flag, which a flagpole is this area, and now this is the flag itself. We came back and tested the instantaneous trend line and seemed to have bounced off of it. And right now, even though we've had some changes in the position of the parabolic, right now we hit the parabolic again. It was reversing the trend here, but it hit the parabolic again, suggesting that perhaps next week we will see a reversal to an uptrend again. See, the parabolic got pretty close to price bars here, was hit here, reversed here to a downtrend, but that didn't last for very long because we hit it again for a reversal to an uptrend. So the 9 EMA is above the 30 weighted moving average. That tells us the trend is up, and it is trending up. Oh, it trended up last week. Down here we find the RSI 12 on the daily chart is above the 60% line, so that's confirming the uptrend. And Larry Williams' pro-buying indicator, which this is the formula here, very simple formula. The close minus the open for the last 14 days. And that's also trading above the zero line, confirming the uptrend as well. Percent R is doing the same thing. It's telling us that the momentum is very strong. So on the monthly chart, we have uptrends. On the weekly chart, we have an uptrend. On the weekly chart, the only caveat is that hanging man, which we need to pay attention to, but we don't need to get too negative here because of that. Everything else is pointing to an uptrend continuing from here. And let's take a look at another chart. And the daily chart is also giving us a new high and switching to an uptrend again on the parabolic, even though we had a reversal here. So let's take a look at another chart. Here's a weekly chart of the NASDAQ composite. We look at the weekly chart, we find that the Kalman filter broke through the instantaneous trend line, came down and tested it once, tested it twice, and it was off to the races. We have a pretty parabolic move here. So a pullback, a correction is not out of the question here at all. We might see a pullback. Parabolic is below the most recent bar, so we don't have an indication to reverse the uptrend here. In the middle of the chart, RSI 12 is above 60%, and since it crossed above 40% here, which is the sort of watershed, we remained above the 40% line, indicating that this trend is up. Now at the bottom of the chart, MACD is making new highs, is making a new high here, or at least equaling this high here. So that is looking well for the bulls insofar as the weekly chart on the NASDAQ is concerned. As I mentioned last week, many people, many experienced traders believe that the NASDAQ leads the rest of the market. And we've had some really good action on the NASDAQ, bullish action on the NASDAQ recently. So perhaps that's something that we should bear in mind. Let's take a look at the daily chart. Here's a daily chart of the NASDAQ composite. Couple of things here. First of all, we had this squeeze and then we went down with Brexit, and now we've been trending up since then. The NASDAQ on the daily chart, we're riding the upper Bollinger line here. So now we have the parabolic is hit here, and we're likely to see the parabolic go below the next bar, which is, on Monday. Right now, the Kalman filter remains above the instantaneous trend line, so we have an uptrend on the daily chart. MACD has come down a bit, quite a bit, toward the zero line, but it seems to be have an inclination to move up at the end of the week last week. Now, the Jerry Appel's sum of the rate of change indicator, we had that buy signal here to buy the Qs or the NASDAQ, and since then we're on that buy signal. So we got in here and we're still in the TQs, TQQQ, or any of the Qs really. Let's take a look at another chart. Here's a daily chart of the S&P 500 we usually look at. Right now, we see a squeeze here of the Bollinger Bands, and after this squeeze occurred here, we had sort of a triangle. We had a little triangle here, and we broke above the triangle, and this is where we are now. We saw this on the other chart. These squeezes usually resolve themselves with a pretty nice move either up or down. It appears that we're going to move up. No guarantees on that. As Rukeyser used to say, no guarantees from the management. Jerry Appel's sum of the rate of change indicator is just hovering above the 4% line. So here we are, right above the 4% line. So we're on a hole here. In other words, once we got into the S&P here, if we did, at least in this time, at this time, we could be holding it. And at the bottom of the chart, we have those same indicators, MACD trending up, we have percent R trending up. So the inclination here is that, as we saw before, is that the momentum is pretty strong again. And here's that weekly chart of the S&P 500 with the Commodity Channel Index, or CCI. As long as CCI remains over this 100% line, we should be in pretty good shape. So right now that's where it is. It's trending down a bit, but still above that. MACD is trending up from a test of the zero line here. Parabolic, as we saw, is below this, the most recent bar. This widening formation here is still something to be concerned about, but it has materialized in a downtrend. We've seen the hammer before, so rather not the hammer, but the hanging man. And so we have to keep an eye on this. We could get a pullback here. Now let's look at the stockcharts.com chart with the impulse indicator. Right now we see that the weekly chart, on the weekly chart we have green bars, and the most recent bar is green. On MACD at the bottom of the chart here, in the middle of the chart, we see that MACD is in bullish territory above the zero line. It's regressed a bit and then to the zero line, and now it's trending up a little bit. And at the bottom of the chart, Williams percent R is showing us that the momentum is pretty strong. Momentum of this uptrend is pretty strong. Let's take a look at the daily chart. So we have a green bar on the weekly chart. Let's look at the daily chart. Well, on the daily chart, we had this consolidation period, this flag, this so-called flag, a bullish continuation pattern. And sure enough, we pulled back a bit here. We got a red bar here on the daily chart one day last week, probably about Tuesday, I think. And on Friday, we got this bullish green bar. So both the daily and the weekly charts are showing us green bars. And likewise, as we saw on the weekly chart, MACD is trending up a little bit, but in this case from below the zero line. And Williams percent R is in bullish territory, showing us that momentum is pretty strong. So that's the story with these stockcharts.com impulse indicators. They're both on green. Let's take a look at something else. And the last chart we want to look at today is the best choice chart, the regression channel. And we can see that it's now just a little above 50%. And we do have room to the upside, although we haven't really touched the 90% line since back here in April. But we do have some room on the upside. So insofar as the channel here is concerned, there is room to grow. That's it for now. Have a nice week and enjoy the good weather. I'll be enjoying the Olympics myself. I love it. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.